But I spoke to Rabbi Krauss about it, about getting some simultaneous translation at the bottom, and apparently that wasn't in the budget. So we will continue with the Queen's English. And we're going to be looking at a very unusual site in Israel that right now is full of blooming flowers. And just this week, actually just today, Israel came out of a pretty draconian lockdown. And people are just like bursting out of their houses and exploring the flowers. It's a riot of color everywhere, especially in the north. And I went up a couple of weeks ago to, just before the current lockdown, to make the film we'll be seeing later on in the presentation. And just the juxtaposition of nature and archaeology and old Israel and modern Israel is just really, it's something that's difficult with all our skills as educators or presenters to put across in 2 dimensions. It's a sensual experience, something you need to experience with all your senses, to feel it, to touch it, to walk in it, to smell it, taste it. And hopefully today we'll get as close as we can go without actually being there. It kind of reminds me of the situation we're in now. Back in the 19th century, it was also very difficult for people to travel, but for different reasons. In fact, one of the greatest American writers, Samuel Longhorn Clemens from Hannibal, Missouri, otherwise known as Mark Twain, his best-selling book was a travelogue, and it was called The Innocents Abroad, where he basically took Americans in the States who couldn't travel vicariously, took them to Europe and the Holy Land itself. It's an amazing book. Even now, if you look at it decades, over a century later, it's very amazing descriptions of where he goes. And the Innocents Abroad, of course, are his American co-travelers who he pokes fun at the whole time, that they're so provincial compared to the cosmopolitan Europeans they mix amongst. It's a fantastic book. And one of the questions he asked after he came out from writing that book will be a sub-theme of today's presentation. And that is, everywhere he went in Europe, he saw remains of all the great civilizations, the Colosseum, the Parthenon, the pyramids. And in the shadow of all these ruins of great civilizations, he also saw Jewish communities. And he was very, very perplexed. And when he came back, he thought about this phenomena and wrote a famous essay to a magazine that still exists, one of the few magazines that actually still exists, called Harper's Bazaar. And it's called Concerning the Jews. And at the end of the day, he asked a question in this very 1-page article. You can Google it and look it up. It's very accessible, Concerning the Jews, Mark Twain. And that is, he wrote a whole list of empires. The great empires rose and fell. He went through the whole list: the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans. They held their torch high for a while and then vanished into the twilight. The Jews saw them all, and the Jew was still here, exhibiting no signs of infirmity. What is the secret of his immortality? Question mark. So he finishes the entire article with a question, a rhetorical question. In other words, what did the Jews do right that everybody else did wrong? And that really is a theme of today's presentation, and also the theme of Purim as well. One of the secrets of Jewish survival we'll find and cover in the Purim story itself, especially the roles of the protagonists, Esther and Mordechai. And really, when you think about it, it really doesn't make sense. Here's this people without a country. And Purim, by the way, is the only festival that we celebrate that did not take place in the land of Israel. Every other one of our chagim, of our holidays, all took place within the geographical borders of Israel, except for Purim itself. Another fascinating aspect about Purim and the land of Israel itself is that when the Dead Sea Scrolls were uncovered back in 1947, and the considerable hoo-has, they went around all the caves looking for extra scrolls, they found the scrolls of every single book of the Tanakh except, you got it, Megillat Esther was the only one missing. So it also begs the question, which we'll get to at the end: was Purim even celebrated in the land of Israel in antiquity? That's something we'll get back to at the end. But basically, Mark Twain's asking this crazy question: how does a people without a country, without a central institution, the temple, without central leaders, a king or priests fulfilling the role in the temple, without independence, scattered all over the world, how do they not only just survive, but thrive? And even though Mark Twain didn't live to see it, but also return against all the odds to their ancestral homeland and revive their language and their independence. What did the Jews do right that everyone else did wrong? And that's what tonight's journey is really about, as we look at the message of Purim in the land of Israel. We're trying to find these secrets of Jewish survival. So let's start our exploration. We're going to start with something that happened like it always does in Israel, by accident. In 1993, up in Tzippori in the north, that we're going to show you very soon, a PowerPoint where you'll actually see where all these things are located. Contractors were busy excavating some ground to build a parking lot. And guess what they found under the parking lot ground? Just a 1,500-year-old shul, just lying there, chilling underneath the ground, not even that deep underneath the ground, about 2 meters or about 6 feet under the ground. They found an incredibly well-preserved ancient synagogue in Tzippori. And the message of that synagogue floor really helps us understand the message of Purim. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and pop into a PowerPoint right now. I'm going to share screen, hope it works. PowerPoint Tzippori, and enlarge it. And Rabbi Kraus, can you see the PowerPoint on your screen?
We can.
Okay, excellent. So the introduction is called Promise to Redemption, the synagogue mosaic from Tzippori. Okay, so let's first of all start off with where Tzippori is. On this map, it's given its Greek name, Sephoris, and it's exactly in between the Kinneret, which is here called the Sea of Galilee, even though we all know it's not a sea, it's a freshwater lake. In fact, the lowest freshwater lake in the planet Earth, and the Mediterranean. So back in days of yore, not days of mine, but days of yore, they had 2 main paths in Israel, the 2 main trade routes. One was called the Derech Hayam, or the Via Maris, which basically went along the coast. It was part of what's known as, it was the end of the Fertile Crescent. That's the road that Abraham and Sarah finished off their travel all the way from Mesopotamia. They came down the coast, the Via Maris. And the other main north-south route was this route over here in the Jordan Valley that was called in times of antiquity Derech HaMelech, or the King's Highway. So if you wanted to build a city, and here is how it looks today, the city of Tzippori on the right, you needed 4 things. Besides the 3 classic things, which is location, 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 you needed 4 things to survive, the 4 Ds. One is it had to be drive, you had to be on a major trade route. So here you have the north-south route, and Tzippori is one of the main cities that connects these 2 routes. Excellent location. You also needed to be able to drink, a water source. You needed to be able to defend it, and you can see Tzippori is actually on a hill. In fact, the Gemara even says it got its name, Kirshev Kitzipor Alaha, is it sits like a bird on top of the mountain itself. And basically, the last thing you need, of course, was agricultural food. And you can see it's a very fertile area all around. To this day, there are many kibbutzim, and there's a yeshuv called Hoshaya, just over here, religious yeshuv, and a religious kibbutz called Bet Rimon, all over here. So it had the 4 Ds, drink, drive, obviously not together, defend, and defense. So let's move on to why it's famous. So if you ask most people why Tzippori is famous, they'll say, oh, because the Mona Lisa of the Galilee. And on the right here, they found a Roman villa. It's just this black building in the left over here. And in this Roman villa, they found an exquisite mosaic. It has literally 23 different shades of color in it. Shows whoever lived in Tzippori had a highly cultured and advanced civilization. It also shows, and this is part of our presentation tonight, that they were very much affiliated with what the Gemara calls Chochma Yevanit, or Greek wisdom, or the surrounding culture. Because in this floor, not only do you have this beautiful woman whose eyes do literally follow you everywhere, just like the Mona Lisa, as we'll see in the video, wherever you go, she's looking at you. The people were wealthy because the mosaic is very, very small squares, like the DPI is incredibly small. This is the kind of quality you'll see on any of the best mosaics in Pompeii or anywhere in the Roman Empire. But around the woman, which you don't see in this picture, which we'll see in the mosaic, in the video, is a mosaic of the Roman god story of Dionysus, the Roman party god. So here, literally a stone's throw away from the synagogue we'll be examining, was a house with a Greek mythology and Roman mythology on the floor. Very unusual. Let's look on the left here. These are all the archaeological digging squares, they're 5 meter by 5 meter squares. Tzippori is still being excavated right now. It's massive. The huge side you can see is literally just the tip of the iceberg. It's about 10% of the actual town itself, which is underneath the hill. And anyone who studied the Mishnah will know why Tzippori is famous, because that was the home of the guy who actually put the whole Mishnah and sealed it together. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, known as Rebbe, also lived in this town in Tzippori as well. And it was one of the final resting places of the actual Sanhedrin before they ultimately moved to Tuvia. There's a whole list of cities they went to, from Yavne to Usha, from Usha, and it ends up in Tzippori, and then from Tzippori goes to Tuvia. So some incredibly prominent rabbis, even Rabbi Yehuda Nasi himself, lived in Tzippori, and the Talmud tells us there were many synagogues, and until 1993, we hadn't found any of them. So in 1993, there was incredible excitement when one of the many synagogues was finally uncovered, again by accident. And as you can see, it's very narrow and thin. So one of the giveaways when Joe or Jane archaeologists are busy digging in Israel, how they know they've hit a Bet Knesset, there's quite a few giveaways. One, of course, is the orientation, that it's always oriented towards Yerushalayim. It's because we're in the north, the synagogue is facing the south. It's always one of the questions I ask my groups, which way does the shul face? They always say west. But the correct answer is depends where you are, because around the world they all face Israel. So in Australia, the antipodes of Rabbi Krauss is from, it faces towards like the northwest. And when I grew up in South Africa, it was due north, and in America really is the east, and et cetera, et cetera. In Israel, it faces Yerushalayim, the big J town, and in Yerushalayim, it faces Har HaBayit, or the Temple Mount. So you have these 3 concentric circles connecting Jews all over the world. That's why you feel that energy in the Kotel on Friday night. So basically, you have this very narrow shul, beautifully designed. And let's have a look at some of these. First of all, the structure is pretty narrow. You can see the seating, which is over here on the sides. Now, the real giveaway we know to shuls because there's donor plaques, right? Jews like putting their names on places when they donate things. It's a known phenomena. It's not just a recent phenomena. In fact, even the Bet HaMikdash itself, there was a gate there called Nicanor's Gate. Guess who donated them? Yep, you're right. It was a wealthy Jew from Cyprus called Nicanor. And here, they knew they were at a shul before they found any Jewish symbols, because they found the donor plaques on the side of the floor, in this case, literally embedded into the floor, and they're written in Aramaic, Zechu Latov, Latav, and they have the names of the donors. So let's look at the panels briefly, because we're exploring them more in the video itself. Okay, the first panel, you have the famous story of the angels. Now, the first thing you might have noticed is, look over here. What's this alphabet? That's right, it's Greek to you, it's Greek to me, it's Greek. So in the middle of a shul floor, you have a Greek alphabet. What's going on over here? This is one of the things we will be examining in our tour, right? That most of the language on this floor is actually Greek, not Hebrew, not Aramaic, but Greek. And we find here just the top of a woman's head. The first panel depicts a woman over here, but we know from the sentence over here and from the top of the head, this is actually depicting Sarah Imenu, Sarah, the wife of Abraham. And basically it's when the angels come and tell her she's going to be having a child. Now, how do we know this? From a teeny little fragment of mosaic, because there's a very similar one in a church, believe it or not, in Italy. So clearly there was some kind of mosaic copybook that all these mosaic artists were using. And we can reconstruct it if you look at this picture down at the bottom over here. That the first one has the promise that Sarah will have a child. Of course, she laughs, and the child is called Yitzchak. So that's the promise, right? The second band has the famous story of the Akedah, or the near sacrifice of Isaac. Again, look at the top. All of the explanations are in Greek. Okay, you have the 2 boys over here, the Shtei Narim that came with the donkey. And of course, you have over here the actual ayil itself. And it says in Greek, the sentence in the Bible, Hinei ha'ayil. Behold, is the goat that was sacrificed out of Yitzchak. So it starts off with a promise, right? The promise that you will be a great nation, as multitudinous as the stars. Now, what really knocks people out, as we're about to see when we do our video tour, is the middle of this shul floor. You basically have, and there's no way of actually making this sound better than it is, you have a pagan god. You have a Greek god, the sun god Helios, in the middle of a shul floor. So you might want to ask yourself a question like, what is a nice Greek god doing in the middle of a shul floor? And that, believe it or not, is part of the story we're going to be examining about the connection with Purim and the connection with the outside world, the connection with Judaism. So I'm not going to give you the answer now. We'll look at it later. I just want you to think about it, right? Here's Helios, the sun god, and his chariot over here with the horses. And around you have the Mazalot, the stars. And of course, the Gemara has a debate whether we believe in stars or not. And is in Mazal Yisrael, Yesh Mazal Yisrael, do we believe in stars? But to this day, on every Jewish happy occasion, what do we say? Mazal Tov, right? You should live under a fortunate star. So here you have the names actually in Hebrew for a change. Like here's Akrav, and then you'll have the month, this is Scorpio, and the Hebrew month over here. So you have Keshet for Sagittarius, and underneath there, Kislev for the Hebrew month. Around it, you have the 4 seasons, 4 women dressed in different clothes, in Greek and in Hebrew. So here it says Tukufat Tevet, Tukufat Tammuz, the different spring, summer, winter, and autumn, in Hebrew and in Greek. So far we've seen Aramaic, Hebrew, and Greek in this shul floor. But this is pretty stunning. I think here's some details are. Here is Tukufat Tevet. Here's a woman dressed up for the autumn. And here is the Kislev, Sagittarius, which of course is a Greek god, the half horse, half man. So again, Greek mythology in a synagogue floor. And in case you think it's just a coincidence, you actually have all over Israel these mosaic floors with Greek gods in the middle. This is a place called Bet Alpha near the Gilboa. And this actually is in Tuvia itself, the very city where the Jerusalem Talmud was written, also has a pagan god. You can see over here, Helios waving hello to everyone. In the middle of the shul floor, where some of the rabbis who actually wrote the Gemara, the Jerusalem Talmud, would have davened in, you actually have the Greek god. So what's going on over here? Get ready for the connection with Purim. The 4th band, of course, is temple rituals. You have this is the showbread basket. That's what the American holiday of Thanksgiving is based on. When they came with the first fruits of the temple, the Bikurim, you have the musical instruments, such as the cymbals, the showbread table, etc., the shofarot. The 5th band, you have the Mizbeach itself, all to do with the temple, which, by the way, had not been standing for 500 years when the shul was built. The 6th band, you have the menorah, which we'll talk about more in the film itself, the menorah. In the middle here is the facade of that same temple that hadn't stood for half a millennia. And here a picture of it is on a coin from the Bar Kokhba period, which also shows the facade of the temple. And the chances are the people who made this coin probably were still alive and saw the actual facade of the Second Temple, such as the Venerable Rabbi Akiva, who was alive when the Second Temple stood and still alive 65 years later when the revolting Jews revolted again. So you have the facade of the temple and the menorah. And the final 7th band, of course, over here is another inscription for the really big cash donors, the billionaire donors, and the Lions of Judah as well, symbolizing a return. So this whole shul floor tells us a story, which we're going to see in the video, of the promise of Abraham and Sarah by Hashem, and it finishes with the ultimate hope of the redemption, when we can go back at Zecher LeMikdash, we should remember our temple, and we should also come back to be a rebuilt homeland. Beautiful theme. Again, we're still missing that one point, and that's the P word, Purim. Just before we hop onto the film, I want to show you guys this, which is the menorah in the synagogue. There's a line on top, because the Gemara says you can't portray the menorah exactly the way they looked in the temple, out of respect. But the one on the Arch of Titus, of course, does have that's traditionally believed to be the menorah from the Second Temple itself. But the bottom of it, interestingly enough, was added on by the Roman captors and actually has pagan symbols in it. So it symbolizes taking the light out of Zion. And the same menorah is also on the symbol state of Israel, bringing the light back into Zion as well. So a lot of symbolism going on with the menorahs and with the shul floor itself. And now what we're going to do, because we could have just read all that in a book or seen all the pictures in a book, and there actually is a book called Promise to Redemption by the archaeologists who excavated that floor. We're now actually going to go as close as we can to actually go to Israel. Now, before Rabbi Krauss pops the video on and actually tour the site itself, just a couple of seconds of explanation. You'll see 2 other people in addition to me in the video. One is my good friend Shmuel Chantal, who's also a tour guide in Israel, who also lives in Modi'in as well. And he's the cameraman, and he also edited the video as well. And this video is from his YouTube channel called The Running Tour Guide. I have my own YouTube channel called Tuvia Book, original name. And the other kid you see running around with us is my younger brother, Avigdor, who's actually, in addition to being a robotics engineer, a champion runner as well. So we're running around Tzippori off the beaten track. And what we're trying to do as we run around is we go through the city itself, the Roman, Jewish, Greco-Roman city, and we end up in the shul and walk through the shul and explore the themes of the shul. When the video is over, I'm going to tie it all up to the story of Purim. Rabbi Krauss, over to you.
Thank you. And there are some questions coming in, so please continue sending the questions.
Should I stop my share?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, it's a steep climb. We're heading to the citadel, to the house of Dionysus. We'll have an entertainment break on the way. Good idea. It's quite a hill. Come on, put in some effort. The Eshkol Valley, it's green, it's gorgeous. It's a lifeline of the land, a national water carrier, pumping water from the Sea of Galilee, comes through this valley to the center of Israel. Oh, love the north. Actually love the south. I love the east. I love the west. I love everything. So grateful for the land. Moving on. Ruins of Tzippori, but it's not in ruins. Look beyond the view, through the fig tree. Try and figure that out. That is a modern, established town named Hoshaya. We need to get entertained. Where was the place of entertainment? Well, we don't have to dream about it or read about it in a book. Here it is for us to see. Are you not entertained? From Gladiator the movie, here we are in the orchestra. Check out Skitopolis, the show that we did in the Greek city of Beit Shean. You can see the seats of the theater. Now, during Greek times, you would have expected this theater would have been built in order to see the view. Today we can see the view, but if you notice this iron structure behind me, this is what you call a scanner fronts. So after the Greeks came the Romans, they were not interested in the view. They actually blocked the view by building the scanner fronts, and everybody sitting in these seats would be entertained on the orchestra where we are. So fascinating history here in Tzippori. But you know, thinking about it, the Romans, the Roman period, is it relevant to us? Do we need to learn about this history?
Well, I don't know. They were the first to provide us with aqueducts for irrigation, roads, education, public safety, and of course, wine. And anything else you can think of?
Besides that, what did the Romans ever do for us?
He's got a point.
Don't know.
Beats me.
Nothing.
No time to waste. Let's roam around. Run, run, run. We're just about to meet some friends. Hoping we can get some drone footage for you of this magnificent sight. Stay tuned. Ready, set. So folks, there you have it. During the Roman times, people would enjoy a view. Here we are using a drone to get a view they would never have had from above. Who says that it doesn't get better with age, with time?
Exactly. What did the Romans ever do for us? Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who developed this DJI Mavic Mini? Not the Romans. It's called Israeli technology. Thank you guys. Be good. Okay folks, welcome to the house of Dionysus. At the bottom here you can see the Mona Lisa of the Galilee, and it doesn't matter where you are in this building, she's looking at you.
check out next?
Okay, folks, part of the reason we know that this is aristocracy, here we have the royal flush. This is the lavatory. Now, to have running water and a lavatory next to your house during those times is a sign of wealth. And it looks like Greek to me. Dr. Book, come a little closer. We heard you read Greek earlier. We heard you read that Greek earlier. What does that say?
Greek to you and Greek to me. But it actually says labriot in modern Hebrew, which would be
To
your
have.
health.
Yes, the sun is dipping, but where else on planet Earth can you decide to go and daven the afternoon prayers in an ancient synagogue? So that's where we're heading, to a Beit Knesset, a house of gathering from the Mishnaic period, Mincha, the afternoon prayers. There will be a Kiddush provided sponsored by the book. 2 minutes and 50 seconds per kilometer. Woo! Okay, folks, here we are. It's not often that you have to wait to get into a synagogue, but that's what we're doing. And Dr. Book has actually done his graduate research on this synagogue, so he's going to give us the 7 key facts of this incredible site here in Tzippori.
This synagogue, like many incredible artifacts in Israel, was found totally by accident. The Talmud relates that Tzippori had so many Jews in it, there was many synagogues. And even if there was one Jew, let's be honest, he would still build 2 synagogues. We know why, right?
Tell me.
The one you go to and the one you would never be seen dead in. So they found, until the synagogue, they found a brief inscription that mentioned one of the synagogues. And this particular one, back in 1993, they were just literally building a parking lot for the visitor traffic, and boom, they found this stunning Byzantine period synagogue. Let's go and take a look.
Check it out. Minche.
Mincha? Mincha.
Welcome to Shul. The Beit Knesset, the house of prayer, the house of gathering. You won't believe this. Wow. Wow. Facing Jerusalem. 7 panels, 7 themes. Dr. Book, take it away. Od Yahalelucha. Selah. We're going to talk about the number 7. 7 is a very significant number. The Jews sanctify the 7th, and here we are in a place of sanctity. Bring it down for us, Dr. Book. Panel number 1.
Okay, panel number 1 is the beginning of the promise theme. Over here is Sarah being told by the angels that she will be expecting a son, and she laughed, and therefore the son was called Yitzchak. Panel number 2 are the 2 boys and the donkey going to Har Moriah, where Abraham told them, we will go and we will come back. And there's the next panel, you can see Hinei Ha'ayil, there is the goat.
Mount Moriah.
Right.
Panel number 3.
Panel number 3 is the central panel of this entire synagogue, which is a zodiac mosaic, a Galgal Mazalot in Hebrew. And you might ask yourselves, why is there a Greek god and Greek mosaic in the middle of a nice Jewish floor? All back to the same theme, adaptation without assimilation. In the middle of this panel, you see the Greek god Helios, the sun god. You see the sun and the chariot. In the 12 panels around, you see the 12 months of the year and the 12 zodiac symbols, known as mazalot in Hebrew. That's why we say mazal tov, you should have a good star. On the 4 corners, you have the 4 different seasons represented by women in different dress for different seasons. Nisan, Tevet, Tammuz, Tishrei.
Panel number 4.
Panel number 4, we have the beginning of the redemption, Zecha Lemigdash. Over here, next 4 panels are to do with the temple itself and our hope to have a rebuilt temple. So these 3 rectangles within panel number 4 show things that happened in the temple. The Shofar, the musical instrument, the sacrifices, the showbread table, the offering of the fruits. All these are vessels of the temple, and the signs in Greek and in Hebrew.
Panel number 5.
Panel number 5, we have the sacrificial altar itself. You see the two horns of the altar, Kanei Mizbeach, and over here the animals being led to the sacrifice.
Panel number 6.
Panel number 6, you have the hope of our redemption. You have the ark with the Torah, or some say the facade of the temple itself. And on each side, there are menorahs. Next to the menorah are the lulav and etrog and the shofar, all used in temple ritual.
Panel number 7.
And finally, panel number 7, we have the Lion of Judah on both sides. The Jews who once again return to Judah, and the hope of 2,000 years, Hatikva Shnot Apayim, Liot Am Chofshi Ba'Artzenu. And this synagogue remained buried under the ground until it was uncovered by the new Jews back in our land, from promise to redemption.
So let's live out that promise. We're going to be doing the afternoon prayers, Mincha, in the ancient synagogue. But before we do, Viggy Avigdor is going to give us a show. Press play, please. Let the show begin. Popcorn and Coke. So folks, I hope you enjoyed the synagogue experience. We sure did. We've made use of the light we've had, but just plugging in back to the synagogue and the theme of what we've managed to achieve in Tzippori.
Adaptation without assimilation. We went to a Jewish holy building and yet saw beautiful Byzantine art mosaics. We saw Greek in it. We saw adaptation of Roman gods. All of this was in a Jewish setting. The chameleon effect. The Jews managed to take all the good of the surrounding culture and incorporate it within their Judaism. It wasn't either we'll be part of the outside world or we'll be Jewish. It's Torah im derech, Torah with the way of the world.
And that's the side of Tzippori, really combining all of those aspects. And inside the synagogue, we were so touched by the song Shir Lama'alot, the Songs of Ascents, Psalm 121. And we'd like to thank Avigdor Book for joining us on the journey. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel. There's lots more coming. Not only tourism, there's running. We'll be doing some epic running in 2021. There could be the comrades, the holy comrades back in the land from Jaffa to Jerusalem. But we'll finish off with a song, and the song goes as follows. Shir Lama'alot, Esa enai el ha'arim, me'ayin yavo Ezri, Ezri me'im Hashem, Oseh shamayim va'aretz, al yiten lamod raglecha, al yanum shomrecha, hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael me'ata ve'ad olam. From whereupon comes my help, from the God, the creator of all. As I look towards the mountains and the essence of Israel, you've got to come and visit. Come home, be appreciative and grateful for the land we have, for you, for me, for everybody.
Amen.
Peace out.
Amen.
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 Thank you, Rabbi. Sons of rabbis. Okay, now it's time for some trail running. Finally. Yeah. So we're going to start with these olive groves. Olive in Israel, where do you live?
Well, you also live in Israel.
Oh, do you? Let's go this way. Come.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me? Excellent. All right. So basically, we've got a situation here where you've got one of the questions is the whole mixture of Jewish and non-Jewish iconography. So let's look at the Purim story. Who are the heroes of the Purim story? You've got Mordechai and Esther, Nice Jewish names, right? Plenty of people, even in the most ultra-Orthodox communities, Mordechai and Esther are accepted human name, Jewish names. And yet, when you look at them, you realize that actually they're not so Jewish, because Esther was from the Canaanite fertility goddess Astarte, and Mordechai was Marduk Chai. Marduk was the main Babylonian deity. So you have these very Jewish characters with non-Jewish names. Now, the Megillat Esther is also written in, as in the Torah we read today, in something called Aramaic square script, which is not Hebrew. The original Hebrew alphabet was from the First Temple period, was basically, it's still only used by one extremely small sect in Israel called Shomronim, or Samaritans. And the very alphabet we use today is actually an alphabet we brought back from Babylonia to Israel. The letters are the same, but the shape of them is different. Let's look at our Hebrew months, right? We're in Adar now, the month of Purim. We have Nisan, Sivan, Tammuz, Ab, Elul. Nice Hebrew months, no? No, they're not. They're actually Babylonian month names. Tammuz was a major deity in Babylonia. So we also have their month names as well. Like, for example, Iyar, the second month of the Jewish calendar, actually really does have a Hebrew name. It's called Chodesh Ziv, or the month of light. So we took their names, we dressed like them, we took their very alphabet, and in fact, as you can see from the synagogue floor, we also adopted their languages. Very few Jews, even at this time, actually spoke Hebrew. The more sophisticated cosmopolitan Jews spoke Greek, or Koine, a form of Greek, a dialect of Greek, which is considered to be the most cosmopolitan language then to speak around the Roman and Greek Empire. Even Hadrian himself didn't speak Latin, he spoke Greek. We dress like the non-Jews as well. And in fact, we very much incorporated a lot of the non-Jewish philosophy into our Judaism. And yet we stayed Jewish. This is clearly a synagogue flaw. And clearly Mordechai and Esther were Jewish characters with all the assimilation. So what we did over here is we didn't assimilate, we adapted and incorporated into our Judaism the good things of the surrounding culture, adaptation, without assimilation. In other words, almost like a chameleon, right? One of the things I used to do BC before Corona is travel a lot, as Rabbi Krauss said. I've been to numerous countries. I've been to every continent except for Antarctica. And I almost went there as well, but that's a whole different story. And everywhere I go, I love to pop in and see how do the MOTs live, the members of the tribe. I like to go to the shuls, Chabad houses. It just fascinates me. And everywhere you go, you'll see shuls, wherever Jews live. And yet, the shuls look different and the same. So when I was in India, I went to the synagogue and noticed they had a lot of Hindu type designs, carved wooden lotus flowers, lots of colors, yet there was a bima, there was a Aron Kodesh, and it faced Yerushalayim. When I was in Holland or Curacao, I noticed the very Dutch design buildings, yet they had the Jewish features in as well. And wherever I go, we have this idea of the Jews as chameleons, where they can adopt the architecture and culture, the surrounding culture, but incorporate into their Judaism. Clearly, Mordechai and Esther were incredibly assimilated to Persian culture. Mordechai was an advisor to the king, Esther was married to the king. And they took very clearly that the Jews there took the advice of Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah the prophet. See, Jeremiah wasn't just a bullfrog, he was also the prophet as well. And he said that basically, where you go, you should really try and make a go of it. You should adapt, you should incorporate, you should build houses, businesses, settle down, build schools, build shuls, and really, really, really make your life comfortable there. Just, the Jews were so good at that to such an extent, from a generation later, more or less the time of the Purim story, when the Jews were told, okay, you can go back now, because the Babylonians, as we know, were conquered by the Persians, and the Persian king Cyrus said to the Jews, okay, you can go back. How do we know he said that? Not just because the Bible says so, right, at the beginning of the book of Ezra and Divrei Yamim, the book of Chronicles, but if you go to Kleptomaniac's Paradise, otherwise known as the British Museum in London, you'll see they actually have the original Seal of Cyrus, where he says to all the conquered peoples, you can go back and rebuild your temples. Did the Jews go back? Heck no, they didn't. A few did. Ezra went back, and a few of the leaders, and a few people who obviously hadn't made it in Babylonia. But most of the Jews stayed. Why? Because they were comfortable. They stayed there, and they stayed there, and they stayed there, all the way up to 1950, 1951, when they were kicked out by the Iraqi government after the creation of the State of Israel, and 135,000 Jews made their way to Israel in Operation Ezra Nehemiah. Does that think of anything today? Of course. Today, when we have a State of Israel, the Jews yearned and prayed for millennia, right? To be a holy, the hope of the Jewish people for 2,000 years. Most Jews, I'd say about half, by choice, still don't live there. And you can see why, because they took the advice that Esther and Mordechai took, that they made themselves comfortable where they are, with their shuls, with their Bete Knesset, with their mikvahs, with the whole Jewish, with the kosher restaurants, let's not forget, with all the Jewish infrastructure. And even though they very much see Israel as a spiritual home, physically they don't live there. So this really is what's going on with Mordechai and Esther and the whole story of Purim. Mark Twain's question, what did the Jews do right that everyone else did wrong? They did three things, and you see these three things in the Purim story, and you see them in the synagogue in Tzippori itself. What are these three things the Jews did right that everyone else did wrong? Because don't forget, imagine you went back in time 2,000 years, and you saw a Roman soldier destroying the Jewish temple on Tisha B'Av in the year 70 in Jerusalem. And you went up to him and tapped the soldier on his shoulder, say that when you're drunk, the soldier on his shoulder, and say, by the way, in 2,000 years' time, there'll be no Roman Empire, it'll just be dust and ashes. But the Jews whose temple you're busy destroying, they will be back, they will be praying to the same God, they will be speaking Hebrew, they will be farming this land, they will be defending this land, they will be in charge of their own destiny once again. How would that Roman soldier have reacted? He would have had a good laugh and then probably given you a smiley face in your neck with his short sword. And so that can't be. We're the Roman Empire, we rule the world. And yet here we are 2,000 years later. And because of these three things, the Jews stayed Jewish. Well, what are the three things? One is our tradition. The Mordechai and Esther, no matter how assimilated they were, or the Jews who lived in Tzippori, how assimilated they were with their Greek inscriptions and dress and clothes, they still understood that our tradition, our Torah, is central to our faith. We didn't cut ourselves off from the outside world, because Gemara says, Al tifosh me'ad Tzippor, don't cut yourself off from the community outside you. Be part of the world around you, but also be an olagoyim, be a light to the nations. So we have our tradition. The second thing Jews always had, which the Bet Knesset symbolizes, and also the story of Purim itself, is community, right? The sense of Am Yisrael, peoplehood. That when Esther had to go and see the king, she said to Mordechai, what did she say? Ask the people to fast for me. It wasn't just a queen going to a king, it was an entire people involved here, the sense of community and peoplehood. When things happen in Israel, all over the Jewish world, we are concerned and watch and care about it. We have the sense of peoplehood wherever we are. And finally, and not by any means least, they're just blocks, but the cement that holds it together, the cement is something in Hebrew called She'ifah L'Tzion. We were always yearning for Zion. Wherever we lived, from Australia to Afghanistan, Jews always yearned to go back to Israel. So we have Torah Yisrael, Am Yisrael, and Eretz Yisrael. I know it sounds like a B'nai Kiva meeting, but basically you have those three components together. You see in the synagogue floor itself, and you see in the story of Purim itself, that the Jews knew that no matter how assimilated we are, no matter how comfortable we are, what high positions we rise to, we still have our own traditions, and we can incorporate the good of the outside world into our own traditions, right? Adaptation without assimilation. We still have our sense of peoplehood wherever we are. Why were Jews so successful in the Middle Ages? Because they knew they knew all they had to do was go to a local Jewish community, and there'd be hachnasat orchim. They'd be welcomed in by their brothers and sisters. And if something bad happened, they would be redeemed, pidyon shvuim. So you have this sense of community wherever we are. I can go to a country, not speak their language, go to a shul, and immediately I'm with members of the tribe. There's tremendous sense of community everywhere, where the Jews in Israel will celebrate an event that happened in Persia, because we're still brothers and sisters wherever we live. Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Bazeh. We're responsible for each other, and Kol Yisrael Chaverim, and we're all friends. And finally, this attachment to the scene behind Rabbi Krauss to the land of Israel itself. That wherever we live, and no matter how comfortable we are, things can change in a moment, as we saw in the story of Purim. It could have changed in a moment. If Haman would have got his way, there would have been a genocide, but it didn't. So we always know that even in the best of times, in the best of countries, we're still living with a pity or forebearance of our host nation. And there's only one place on the planet Earth where we can be in charge of our own destiny. And of course, that is the land of Israel itself. Okay, Rabbi.
Thank you very much for bringing me back to Tzippori. It's been many years since I was with you when we davened Shacharit there. And there's some questions that have come in, so let me fire them to you, and please continue. Pre-COVID, were there minyanim regularly at the Tzippori synagogue?
It's very interesting that not regularly, because there's actually a yeshuv right underneath called Hoshaya, which is a beautiful religious yeshuv, where they have their own Beit Knesset, where they have regular minyanim 3 times a day. You'd have occasions like people could go to national parks and do weddings and bar mitzvahs. And whenever I go with a group, as you well know, I always daven. I think there's something very spiritual about walking into an ancient synagogue and taking the pasuk, Tivnuli Mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, build me a temple and I'll dwell in them and make it come alive again. So there's not regular minyanim, you just tour guides with the yidlids like to come and pray, and special occasions you can hire it out. When I was there making this film, there was actually a wedding being prepared for an American Oleh couple getting married there, which is beautiful.
Thank you, and thank you for this amazing contextualization to the Purim story. Question that came in, is there any archaeological evidence of the Purim story, either here or anywhere else that you've come across?
You know, obviously I like to wax eloquent, but I can give you a one-word answer, and that's no. 0. Zip. There's absolutely none, which is very unusual because that time period, the 6th century in Persia, there's a lot of archaeological findings. The rabbis in the Gemara mentioned 5 Persian kings, even in the Gemara at the time. But no, the answer is no. Either it can be treated as a morality tale that we can learn from it, like the book of Job, or else it just hasn't been found yet.
Is Bini Shalev still involved in the Tzippori?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, the people who were involved in the original dig are still there digging away there now, yeah.
Okay, and what's the size of the menorah on the mosaic? Is it large? Is it full size?
Well, there's 2.
Anything?
Right, there's 2 menorahs. They flank the facade of the temple on the 6th panel, and they're pretty big. I'm just trying to put it into like probably like about 2 meters, like probably about 6 feet. They're big. They're big menorahs, and they're very much the focus of attention. Those 2 gold menorahs right on top of the floor.
To those individuals raising their hands, just send me the chat. It's easier and more fluid for Dr. Book to answer. If you had to, in 2 minutes, summarize the takeaway for this presentation, as we are days away just from Purim, what would it be, Dr. Book?
Okay, and before I do that, there's also one other question which I noticed you sent me earlier about the actual why is there a zodiac in the Jewish law, and that's simply because they didn't treat it as a pagan god. It was just considered to be cultural designs. They didn't really say that was the gods around it were actual gods. It was just part of the culture, and that's why they took it. They just took it as a symbol of the times they were living in. And of course, they made everything Jewish, with the Jewish interpretation. So for example, Leo wasn't Leo, the lion god in the sky. It was the Lion of Judah. And the twins weren't just twins, it was Jacob and Esau. And so every sign of the Mazalot was given a Jewish interpretation as well. So it was just put on there as a cultural sign, but then reinterpreted in a very Jewish way. Okay, the takeaway. The takeaway basically is, to be Jewish, it's not, oh, I have to cut myself off and live in a self-imposed ghetto and only be amongst Jews and with Jews. And, you know, to use a contemporary contextualization, some of the ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods around the world, like in Borough Park or in Stamford Hill or in Bnei Brak, that's not what our mission is as Jews. The story of Purim and the synagogue in Tzippori with its Aramaic and Greek and Hebrew tells us that we need to be part of the world around us, and we need to make the world better by being part of it and bring that special light to the Jewish people. And we can take all the good of the surrounding world. Believe me, Mordechai and Esther were highly cultured Jews living, and I'm sure they spoke the local language and dressed in parts of them, but they were also proud Jews. It's not a mutual contradiction. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, a famous modern Orthodox German rabbi from 1808 to 1888, happens to be his dates, from Frankfurt, the one who is really the father, we'd say, of modern Orthodox Judaism, his quote, he termed to coin this, Torah im derech eretz, which means it's not a contradiction. Rabbi Hirsch himself had a semicha from an Orthodox yeshiva, but also went to a German university. The service was in Hebrew, but the sermon was in German. So basically, we can be part of the world around us and set the light without having to cut ourselves off. That's what the shul tells us. That's what the poem story tells us. To make the world a better place, to make the world a better place, the image of God, by being part of that world.
Thank you so much. The last question, and before we bid each other farewell, is how can one visit Tzippori when the skies open up, and may that day come soon for all of us to go back to Israel? But does it need registration? Does it mean booking, or is it like there are many other sites in Israel just available to us whenever we want?
It's a national park. You can look it up on the Tzippori Israel National Park website. They also have an English website as well. It's beautiful. The shul, in addition, as you saw, Bidab also has an amazing video that basically explains the floor and the video. There's a visitor center, the entrance of it. It's a huge site. We just saw a fraction of it. If you go to the running tour guide YouTube, you'll see part one Tzippori. We'll see the rest of Tzippori, which has a vast amount of mosaics, Roman streets. It's massive, absolutely massive, and it's an official national park in Israel, so you can visit it. Of course, the best way to visit Israel is by hiring your own personal tour guide to make it come alive.
Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for taking us to Tzippori. Thank you for sharing this beautiful aspect of Purim, and may we all experience Purim this year in safety, and looking forward to all visiting Israel soon. Have a wonderful evening. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you, Tuvia.
Chag Sameach coming up. Shavua Tov. Bye.